Thank you very much indeed for those kind words, and I can hear that I am heard here as well. It's great to be here. In fact, I have been here before in this very room at many of these occasions, but I've never given a talk here before, so it's really a pleasure to be doing that today. And here is an image that conveys some of the spirit from the lab. Marco should have been here because he's the one working on waste management of Naples. That's one of the most challenging projects we have, I can tell you. And it's not me in the suit either. This is an opening picture I like to show, because, and particularly to school children, because they always ask, why are these men lying down? Because rarely we see them lie down. And then I start lecturing about the guillotine and its history, and they can go back home and tell their parents. I think that works. I think, and of course, when you see that picture, you realize that the world is becoming, in many places, a worse place than it used to be. But at the same time, it becomes, at least I think, a better place. And this is just one picture that can be shown to demonstrate the very contradictory image of the world we live in, and that serves as a kind of platform for my oscillation between hope and despair. So this is the logo of this recently installed Climate Policy Council. I won't pay much attention to that in my talk. I just want to mention it as a recent innovation, and we'll probably see more of those in many countries in years to follow, when countries try to deal with climate change in some policy-based way. This is part of a legal framework that was also installed, parliamentary decisions, big inquiries proceeding, and so on and so forth. And with this happening, I think we could safely say, along with Finland, the UK, and a few other countries, that Sweden is really at the forefront, at least in theory, of how to address climate change. And here are the members. We are 8 experts. And the thing to say about that is that we are only a minority are scientists or climate experts in that particular understanding. For example, Marco here is a professor of climatology, and there's the engineer on the left-hand side and so on, a couple of economists, but it's also an historian. And I think if this has been a committee set up maybe 5 or 10 or 15 years ago, it would probably not have been the case. But there seems to be, and that's when I'm optimistic, seems to be a growing understanding that maybe this is a transition or a transformation so big that it will require even historians, that it will require a kind of broad frame thinking that people in history and other humanities and social sciences can provide with some level of expertise. And that is linked also to changes going on in certain universities around the world, but also in Sweden, and I hope at the very end can come back a little bit to that. Otherwise, in this particular setting, you will see quite a number of pictures like these. This is official slides that some of the language here is I haven't translated. It's in Swedish, but you get the picture. It's how you get down to zero, and then of course, how do you do that? I hope to say a couple of things about that as well. This is a remit. It is absolutely magnificent, daunting. We are supposed to cover all policy areas, and because that is the insight of this parliamentary inquiry, is that everything has to do with climate, and climate has to do with everything. So then why don't let 8 people look into all policy areas, which is something we like, because we just don't want to think this is just about transport, this is just about energy. It should be about somehow involving society in a broad frame. And I suppose that is what I have time to say about this. We have an annual cycle. Every last February we publish a report. We've done just one so far, which was just starting after 2 months. We couldn't do a very big report. You have to relate to various international agreements and all these, the Paris Agreement, to EU policies, and this becomes very mathematical after some time, but then it's precisely when you want to sort of move up to the next level and think broadly also, not to sort of get bogged down. And here is just, so we arrive as the new kid on the block in a range of already existing institutes, policy, congregations, and public agencies, and universities, of course, so on and so forth. So the added value here from us is not to do the work that everybody else does, but actually have the mandate to tell the government, this is your policy over the last couple of years in these areas. They will not take us further towards the 2045 goals, or they will, and we will have to explain that. So we feedback and address and really prompt the government. And as Jeroen said, they can do whatever they want. We don't have political power per se, but we expect that the last or 1st of March every year will become a day really devoted in the media to our report. And the government will be it will stand to the test there. And we have one template kind of agency, because we are also formally a public agency, and that is the Financial Policy Council, that for 10 years has become very successful actually in addressing finance policy. You have the international evaluations, of course, that also operate in this. This was the first report we did. And that is about what I want to say about this. This is just now starting to be rolled out, and it's another arena for people like us to work and to try and make use of what we know and think, and I think also believe in. Because transitions and transformations is also very much about how we conceive of future societies. It is knowledge, should be knowledge-based, but it couldn't be only knowledge-based. It also have to do with what sort of ideals we have about future society. The rest of the talk I will rather focus on a few items that I think are fundamental in the kind of framework thinking that I think we need and need to pay attention to. And this is a way of slicing the cake that could be certainly done differently, but I think these are at least elements you need. And for pedagogical reasons, I've used color. And you will see when I run through the slides that where I move from one area into the other. So it's about the Anthropocene that I call the Weltanschauung. I think not just because I'm in Germany, but that is a word that it sort of says the right, gives the kind of flavor to the broad perspective here. And also that we're talking about a second great transformation, and also that we are talking about widening domains of expertise, of which this Climate Policy Council is an example. You know this already, most of you, so I don't need to rehearse any elementary facts about the Anthropocene. Several people in this room have written excellently about this. I published a book in Sweden last year, which sort of summarized this in 200 pages, and I'm trying to get it translated now. I hope that works. Here is one of the main protagonists of the modern story, Paul Crutzen. And here's an image that plays a lot of role in my story here. I go back to Robert Milligan's famous, or to somewhat famous at least, quote from his book Alleged Sins of Science, when he talks about that we are powerless as humanity to do any titanic physical damage to the world or to the earth. And of course this, seeing Alberta tar sands, is an example of how that is plain wrong. So things do change. Nobel laureates said things a couple of generations ago that are now plain wrong. And I think that is also something that historians can tell other people. Things become soon plain wrong. And other things that we didn't believe in become plain right. So these kinds of transformations are perhaps as important as the more tangible material ones, those that happen in our minds and our thinking. Some try to advocate other different ideas, again with the tar sands behind them, like Justin Trudeau, formerly responsible for the tar sands, so to speak, but also other politicians. So there is this ongoing hope and despair kind of situation. And there we know about the plastics, we know about the light, the electricity, the infrastructures, we know about the fighting that is part of the Anthropocene, and how various policy formations and also social distinctions tend to meander and grow in new ways. There's an absolutely brilliant analysis out now, if you can manage Swedish, I think it's maybe also out there in English, from the Swedish Futures Institute for Future Studies, just today, I think, or maybe yesterday, about how to understand the new populist right. There's been much international work about this, but it's very, very good indeed, and how they actually get voters from both the left and the right, and how they are not likely to go back to their parties, how they actually like to be in their new place. It's a worrying report, and it's also part of, I think, Anthropocene politics. These are the famous curves, and the Weltanschauung is also part of the body. I won't have time to go into that now. And to look a little bit more carefully at this, because it speaks to the great transition. This, in a sense, is, you could say, partly trivial facts. They are. We knew about them for a long time in many cases, but to put them together was the trick, and that was done in years in the 90s and the noughties, and then this sort of transformed into a new Weltanschauung, precisely that this is our condition. And it has been also part of the globalizing understanding of the world, which is also a new Weltanschauung. So globalization is not just this neoliberal program, it's also a science-based understanding that we are actually, as Darwin once put it, all netted together. And there is a humanist communication, I think, in that phrase, that we're all netted together. And when I try to this would require an hour or so to go through in any detail, but brilliant as you all are, you just quickly glance and get the point, that here we have methodologies involved, we have ideas about temporalization, we have new ideas about the planetary and the humanity and how they interact and co-evolve. We have actors analysis that we can do. We can look at the genres where this plays out. We can look at the historical antecedents. We can look at the warnings. We can look at the problems. We can also look at the opportunities. And it involves virtually all the sciences and all the humanities and social sciences. So this is really something major going on. And I think the full extent to what this will transform the way we think about ourselves and about the planet and the co-evolution of these hasn't played out yet fully. And it will change the classroom, not just in the STEM fields, but also very much in the humanities. So I think this is a story with enormous potential. And so far, we've only seen, I think, the overture, the Crutzen sort of first few sections of this major symphonic change. And some of us here, most of us, I think, would be interested in being part of the continuation. Part of this thinking was also about, and here I want to show this man called Polanyi, the Viennese economic thinker, how to think about societal change. Because that is when history comes into the picture, that society is also changing. When we think about energy, infrastructures, CO2 emissions, it comes from somewhere. Well, it comes from societal evolution and change. And as we know, in the 40s, he published this book. It changed titles over time, and it became known as The Great Transformation. And to sum up his argument, go back and read the book if you haven't, is basically you cannot look at sectorial change. Well, you can, but what you find when you look at modernization broadly, you find it's a sweeping change. And that's an idea I've taken to heart when we just look at transitions and transformations now as well. With climate change, we will have sweeping transformations across societies, across the world. It is a little bit like the breakthrough of industrial capitalism, this enormous 200 years of transformation. We can be looking at something similar again. Some don't like that. Some like it. That's part of the picture. It was the same time in the past, same thing in the past. Some liked it, some didn't. And now there is a lot of thinking about how this is happening. And again, some people in this room are involved in these discussions. I want to single out the Science Policy Research Unit at Sussex, where some of the economic and also historical thinkers are active doing this kind of work. Here we see a couple of them. Johan Schott to the left, very much involved in this now, really changing SPRU in this direction. And the economist Mariana Mazzucato to the right, who recently left SPRU to to work at London University, I think, or University College London. And there are books with these kinds of titles that are out there to help us along this. And it as you can understand, this also links communities, like, for example, development theorists, economists, and also historians in new ways, because we somehow get an arena where we need to make contributions. And down right corner, some theory of historical transitions, how they play out. You may not underwrite everything of this kind of thinking so far, but it is part of our research right now. Also, in this broad change, you see lots of mobilization of social forces of different kinds. Many organizations, trade unions, the concept just transition has been in circulation. It's a mobilization that not just involves the academic community in isolation, it is combined with other actors in society. As we speak, more or less, I haven't seen it, the report I must admit, but the International Panel on Social Progress, founded by Amartya Sen some years ago, has now, I think, published this report after many years of being in the making. And again, progress was a word we used readily sometime in the past. It was part of our vocabulary. It somehow escaped. There was no progress anymore. It was just growth, or other things were going on. But now I think we need to take it back, reclaim it. And some of this is linked to understanding of what is characteristic of our time. And I've played around in policy discussions with this kind of sort of framework for thinking about the post-war innovation and research policy regimes. And I'd like to think that we are in a period since about a decade of major sustained change based on a new kind of logic that followed from the coupled crises in the previous decade. The financial crisis, the climate crisis, and other crises, also European crisis. Again, hope and despair somehow is an oscillation game with me, but this is something we need to look at. And I think you can understand quite a bit of these policies in the last few years. And also the new interest in humanities and soft social sciences from this super complexity logic. And again, if you look at what where you want to put the agency of knowledge here, it moves more and more into this collaborative mode. Many words to use there. We used to be interested in national research capacity for competitiveness of research institutions like universities, how do you build those? But now it's very much a language of collaboration. And I say this with some empathy. I like this. Although it sometimes disturbs our isolationist tendencies as academics to want to actually also just spend time with ourselves. I think we need to do both. And I think also in important ways this will change the knowledge environments where we work. And I won't say more about this because I don't have the time for that either, but I now want to sort of precisely put in some reflection about the role of history here. And I should actually move down here first and just say a couple of things here that are on my mind right now. And one of the reasons they are on my mind right now is that we did a few years ago organize a meeting at Princeton about what we call historicizing climate change. And that we're now about to publish the final outcome of that meeting, several chapters, and then an introductory piece that I've been working on with a couple of colleagues to how to think about the approach to climate change in history in this time of transformation. And to summarize it, one of the outcomes of that work has been to really the necessity of differentiate here. We have many kinds of climate histories. We have history of climates. We have this which is almost a discipline in its own right. You have climate history, quite a bit of work among archaeologists and others about climate as a driver of change, as an explanation to why civilizations develop or fall down. You have a broader science or intellectual history of climate knowledge, to which several of us have contributed. But then we have also thought that we might be able to talk about something that we can call historicizing climate change itself. So that if we think about climate change as an increasing factor in history, right now in modern societies created by human activities, this change in itself will become a part of history. It is increasingly becoming a part of history, and that is characteristic of the papers to this special issue for climatic change journal. And so we're trying to sort of theorize that a little bit. And I think all these are both legitimate and necessary, but this emerging work on how to understand the kind of social responses that come to climate change is, I think, an increasing challenge and important field to work. And that is actually why I had put this guy in. A Swedish example of one of these approaches I just want to mention as a very good example, actually. I hope some of his books become translated. It's an economist, actually a retired innovation scholar at my own university at KTH, Staffan de Stadius. The title of this book is Climate and Welfare, and towards a new Swedish model, where he actually makes the very robust case that if you go back and look at the growth of the welfare state, its institutions, the trade unions, the public agencies, all these kinds of instruments can be used for transformation. And this book is a 300-page sort of rehearsal of how these instruments, these tools, these societal tools, could be used for this kind of transition. Too few have tried this kind of approach, and I think that is one exemplar or template that we can use. In this special issue, this is a long quote, you don't need to read it, but I sort of like to read to you the last section there about history as the social space where encounters take place and where new conditions for humans and societies and their companion species and their life worlds in natures and environments are unfolding and negotiated. If this is happening through climate change, that is also where historians want to be in understanding transitions, because this is going to be part of the transition. So over to the third and last section here about the widening domains of expertise. Sort of implicitly, by talking about history this way, I think we are, that's part of broadening our understanding of the necessary expertise for this change. And actually, I started thinking about that many years ago, and some 6-7 years ago, I published an article entitled Rethinking Environmental Expertise, where I sort of tried to articulate this. And I've tried to continue on that path. And pedagogically, I want to use this picture. This is KTH in Stockholm, big technical university, the MIT of Sweden in a sense. This is 80 years ago or something like that, into the past. What was going on here in this academic ceremony? We know it. This was an institution geared towards the needs of industry. If you ask the same question for this picture, what can a university do about this? If there was a very clear and distinct answer to the first question, there is not a clear answer here. And I think that is the important thing here. It is not at all clear what we need to do as academics or as historians even, or humanists, in order to address this. But the technology people don't know either. Nobody knows. And that is the challenging thing here. And this will not stay. We will develop ideas of what to do. And that is going on right now. And of course, the same thing for these extremely complex goals. What can we do about them, actually? They're very good and noble, fabulous even. But, how do you make them operational? And if we look at the language of some of the leading thinking institutions here, we can see the contours of this, but only the contours so far. You can look at Raphael Reif, you can also look at Harriet Ritvo on his left-hand side, and she was here, I suppose, at the RCC. So you need to combine knowledge from many fields in new ways. So history cannot be an isolated contribution to this new thinking. You need to collaborate with others. And you need to think about responsibility. Some don't, but we want to do it. And of course, that is already well understood, but it creates some nervous shakeouts in institutions of technology like my own. You look at other universities, they tend to think the same way. You can address these problems only if you combine knowledge. So again, history cannot work in isolation. That has started in many other fields. We have integrated knowledge in biology, in medicine, and it is now coming along very much in the humanities as well, where it wasn't so much of that. You can go to German institutions also where they try in reality to combine fields in new ways. You can go to Cambridge with Crash and other institutions where this is also happening. And of course they have something in Oxford as well if they have in Cambridge. And you can look at the humanities output, how it speaks not just to disciplinary knowledge, it speaks to broader issues, speaks very much about values, and the words like ecology and environment seep into the humanities very deeply these days. And it's part of the kind of cure, at least I believe in that, for some of the concerns about the humanities of our time. And it's happening many places. This is Canada. Transformation of graduate studies, a major discussion there right now. Here's a leading thinker of Canada and the role of humanities, the former president of the University of British Columbia, Stephen Toop, who is now actually, we spot talent, don't we? He's now the president of Cambridge. So, and I wish him good luck in his work in trying to bring this message. And may I tell you this anecdote, it was the Humanities Congress some 10 years ago. He was giving a speech at the UBC. I was there for some reason, I can't remember why, and listened to him. And you know, another president, another talk, you know, but we were 500 humanists at this congregation. After 30 minutes of his talk, it was standing ovations. And you know, 500 humanists don't do standing ovations very often. Rather, we don't take that extra mile to even listen to a president give another talk. But this was worth this. And so I think we see this now building, and to end on an optimistic note, I think we see this in the integrative and transformative humanities, environmental humanities being part of it. And you sample a few things from the web and you find this. It's happening many places. It's many parts of this. So environmental humanities is just one of many fields. And some of this is also linked to institutional reformation and change, like museums, like a new idea of a laboratory, of infrastructures. And my prediction is that these kinds of changes speak to the first kinds of changes I was talking about with climate change, with major transitions, and how to deal with all these major phenomena, some of them lying down, but not yet. And if you want to look at this is maybe something we should spare to the summit. But the evidence for the environment humanities is wide. New books, new journals, and new gatherings, like many of us went to this. And I wouldn't be who I am if I wouldn't close on the small lab that we have set up. Which again, you know, every day goes by and it's a new day. But if you look back at a few years, you find that there is this pretty broad coverage, and I see it right in the middle of this, the Anthropocene Slam in Madison, Wisconsin, where we worked with colleagues from there and from many other places that was just published. And again, the global coverage from an institution is interesting to see also in a few years. And this is the new, I'll close on this note, this is the new program or development plan for KTH in the next 6 years. And never before in the history of the institution, almost 200 years, has there been language like this. Humanities and social sciences are necessary for sustainable technological development. And if you read further down, you find more about this. We are so sort of taken aback by this, we don't really know what to do with it. But at least they formed a committee, and myself, I'm a member of it, again, also with Sabine Höhler, who's also with the same division. She was here yesterday, by the way. So we're part of implementing this now, and we hope for the best. But I see this being a bit hopeful sometimes as somehow the kind of response that is evoked by the major challenges and that are seeking institutional forms. The Climate Policy Council being one, and the way university navigates being another.